You wake up, you scroll, you respond, you smile at the right people, say the right things, go through the motions of a day you don't remember choosing. And yet, something feels off. Not wrong exactly, not broken, just unreal. It's like you're watching your life happen from behind glass, like you're playing a role in someone else's movie, like there's a subtle gap between what you're doing and who you really are. Conversations feel scripted, your routines feel mechanical, even your own feelings feel faint, like echoes from a version of you that doesn't quite exist anymore. Why does nothing feel real anymore? It's a question more people are asking, quietly, privately, often late at night when the world goes still. And if you've asked it too, Jung would say, you're not going crazy. You're drifting away from your center. You're losing contact with something vital, the self. In today's language, we call it burnout. We say we're tired, overstimulated, pulled in too many directions. But Carl Jung had another word for this state, a deeper, more accurate one: disconnection. You're not just exhausted, you're fragmented. Jung believed that every person is born with a deep internal compass, what he called the self. It isn't the ego. It isn't your personality or your achievements or how others see you. The self is the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, potential and limitation. When you live in alignment with that self, you feel real, you feel rooted, you feel present. But when your life is shaped more by performance than authenticity, more by expectation than truth, more by fear than freedom, the connection begins to erode, and slowly, without even noticing, you become a spectator in your own existence. Jung called it the persona, the mask you wear to survive. It's the version of you who knows how to be liked, how to succeed, how to keep the peace, how to appear stable even when you're breaking inside. And it's not a lie. At first, you build the persona to function in society, to get the job, to be accepted, to avoid rejection. But what begins as a mask slowly becomes a mirror. You forget who you are without it. You look into the world and only see reflections of who you're supposed to be. And then, when you're finally alone, you realize there's no one left behind the mask. Jung warned us, the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. It's not that you're fake, it's that you've been performing for so long, you've lost access to what's underneath. And now, reality feels distant, because so are you. The modern world doesn't make this easier. In fact, it makes the mask more addictive than ever. We live in an era of image. We curate personalities online. We compare our inner worlds to the external highlight reels of others. We live through filters, emotional, aesthetic, social, and the more you craft your life to be seen, the harder it becomes to actually live it. Your choices aren't made from depth anymore. They're made from optics. How will this look? How will it read? What version of me does this reinforce? Even joy becomes a branding strategy. Even pain becomes performance. And suddenly, everything feels hollow. Because instead of being, you're constantly presenting. You're building a beautiful simulation and losing yourself inside it. Jung didn't live in the age of social media, but he predicted something that sounds eerily familiar. He said that when a person becomes too identified with their persona, they lose connection with the depths of the psyche. And when that connection is severed, life flattens. You stop seeing symbolism in the world. You stop feeling meaning in your work. You stop hearing your own voice beneath the noise. You may even begin to wonder if you are the problem. Why can't I feel anything real anymore? Why do I feel numb around the people I love? Why does everything good feel muted? But it's not that your emotions are gone. They've just been buried beneath a layer of survival. Jung believed that the psyche is self-regulating. When the mask becomes too rigid, the self begins to rebel. That rebellion shows up as sadness, fatigue, emptiness, or restlessness. But underneath those symptoms is a message. You've gone too far from your truth. It's time to come back. Most people think a spiritual awakening is loud. They expect a burning bush, a breakthrough, a lightning bolt of clarity. But often the first whisper of the self sounds like nothing, like indifference, like disinterest, like silence. That nothingness you feel, that flatness, that sense that life is passing you by and you can't feel your place in it, that is your soul knocking. It's not numbness, it's protest. A protest against a life that doesn't reflect your essence. A protest against roles you've outgrown. A protest against the part of you that still believes fitting in is more important than feeling real. The longer you ignore it, the more unreal things feel. But the moment you turn toward it, really look at it, the door begins to open. There is nothing wrong with you. Let that settle in. There is nothing wrong with you. What feels like numbness, like burnout, like unreality, is not a flaw in your character. It's not a defect in your biology. It's not a spiritual failure. It is the natural consequence of living out of alignment with yourself. Jung believed the psyche demands wholeness, and when it's denied that, it withdraws. You feel distant from reality because you've become distant from your own depths. And the way back is not found in self-optimization, not in productivity hacks or in fixing your mood. It begins with remembrance, with asking, who was I before I put on the mask? And what part of me has been quietly waiting to return? Carl Jung once wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real." Let's break that down. You feel like life isn't real anymore. But maybe it's not life that's lost its substance. Maybe it's you who's lost contact with something essential inside you. That something? It's called the shadow. The shadow is every part of you you've repressed, denied, rejected, or labeled not good enough. It's not just darkness or trauma. It's potential. It's intensity. It's instinct. It's truth. The kind of truth that would make you impossible to ignore. But instead of expressing it, you were taught to hide it. To be good, to be safe, to be agreeable, polite, perfect. And now you're paying the price. Because the more you hide your truth, the more life hides its meaning from you. Here's the hard part. What you refuse to face within yourself doesn't disappear. It turns into projection, into emotional numbness, into distorted relationships and self-sabotage. You might feel like the world has turned gray, but it's not the world. It's your perception. When you're living in opposition to your shadow, you begin to experience everything through a filter. Joy feels dangerous. Stillness feels threatening. Success feels like a setup. Love feels unreal. And that's because your nervous system isn't confused. It's divided. It's torn between the version of you you're pretending to be and the version of you that wants out of the cage. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Fate isn't destiny. Fate is living the same lie over and over because the truth still terrifies you. So, how do you know if the shadow is the root of your unreality? You'll recognize it by these patterns. You feel emotionally flat in situations that should be joyful. You're bored even when everything in your life looks good. You pull away from intimacy just when you crave it most. You feel haunted by vague dissatisfaction. You feel inauthentic around almost everyone. You keep wondering, is this it? These aren't random feelings. They're symptoms of disconnection. The shadow doesn't just hold pain, it holds meaning. And until you turn toward it, you'll keep trying to find yourself in places that aren't you. Shadow work is often sold as healing, but that's not quite right. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about returning to yourself, to the wild, intuitive, fully alive part of you that was pushed into the dark the moment you were told you shouldn't be that way. That's what you're missing. You're not missing motivation. You're not missing clarity. You're not missing some grand life plan. You're missing you. And you can't fake your way back to that. You have to sit with it. You have to listen. You have to stop performing long enough to let the buried parts speak. And they will speak, usually through emotional triggers, recurring dreams, sudden bursts of rage, grief, longing, or creative energy, obsessions and attractions that don't make sense. These are messages, not malfunctions. The shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to reconnect you. The emptiness you feel, it's not a void. It's a space, a sacred pause, a clearing. Something in you knows the old version of your life doesn't fit, but the new version hasn't revealed itself yet. And that space in between, the numbness, the confusion, the silence, is not a punishment. It's an invitation to stop chasing a reality that never belonged to you, to stop clinging to a role you've outgrown, to stop pretending to be small just so others stay comfortable. This is your threshold, the moment before the real you steps forward again. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's also holy. The real reason nothing feels real anymore? Because you've polished yourself into something unrecognizable. You've sanded down your edges. You've filtered your voice. You've packaged your soul. And now you're wondering why you feel like a ghost. But ghosts are just people who were never allowed to be whole. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be present. And that presence doesn't come from learning more, doing more, achieving more. It comes from allowing more, allowing your fear, allowing your hunger, allowing your intuition, allowing the full, messy, miraculous you to walk into the room unedited. That's where reality lives, not outside you, but within. You're not the only one pretending. That's what makes the unreality feel so heavy. We live in a time where the persona has scaled, not just individually, but culturally. Whole societies are performing. Tribes built on signaling virtue, influence measured in optics, connection reduced to image management. You're not just wearing a mask, you're surrounded by masks. And the more collective the performance becomes, the harder it is to tell what's true, what's sincere, what's grounded, what's human. Jung believed that collective cultures often fall into neurosis when the individual self is denied in favor of social order. In his words, the more civilized we become on the outside, the more ferocious the shadow becomes on the inside. When a society idealizes perfection and suppresses depth, we begin to live in simulation, not digital simulation, psychic simulation, a shared hallucination of what life is supposed to be. And the deeper you go into that performance, the more unreal you become to yourself. Jung warned that when societies lose their relationship to symbols, they lose their soul. Symbols are not decorations. They are the ancient language of the unconscious. The psyche speaks through images, myths, dreams, metaphors. But we've traded symbols for slogans. We've replaced inner meaning with outer branding. Instead of asking, "What does this mean to me?" we ask, "What does this say about me?" We no longer wear clothing for self-expression. We wear it for messaging. We don't speak truthfully. We speak in emotionally curated sound bites. Even spirituality has become stylized. Even rebellion is often aesthetic. And the deeper we drift from authentic symbols, the more we lose touch with depth. We're surrounded by signs, but we're starving for meaning. You're constantly seen, but not known. There's a difference. Social visibility isn't presence. Recognition isn't connection. Attention isn't intimacy. You post, you share, you engage, but deep down, you feel invisible because no one's seeing the real you. Why? Because you've never shown them. Not fully, not vulnerably, not without the filter. And until you do, the disconnection remains. You can't feel real in a world where you've only ever shown your persona. You can't feel grounded when you've never spoken from the shadow. You can't feel alive when your life has been shaped by approval instead of alignment. So, how do you begin to feel real again? Jung believed it starts with symbolic living. That means reconnecting to things that carry personal meaning, not utility, not status, meaning. Ask yourself, what do I do simply because it moves something in me? What images stir something deep in my psyche? What stories or myths have always felt like they were about me? What dreams keep coming back, asking to be seen? These aren't distractions, they're soul signals. Jung often used active imagination as a technique to let the unconscious speak, through image, emotion, fantasy, or dialogue. Because the more symbolically you live, the more dimensional your world becomes. And slowly, the flatness begins to lift. You stop being a character and start being a participant. Nothing feels real because you're moving too fast to feel. You perform, you respond, you scroll, you chase. But have you sat with yourself fully, honestly, without trying to fix or filter anything? That's where reality begins to return. In the silence, in the stillness that most people are too afraid to face. Jung believed that every person has a center, a self that isn't dependent on roles, achievements, or impressions, but you can't access that center from speed. You can't connect with it while pretending. You have to slow down enough to hear what you've been avoiding. Not your thoughts, not your to-do list, but your truth. Here's the twist Jung would offer. You're not meant to feel normal in a disordered world. You're not meant to find deep joy in surface living. You're not supposed to be content with approval while starving for freedom. The very fact that you feel this disconnect is a sign that something deeper in you is waking up. You've outgrown the simulation. You've outgrown the mask. You've outgrown the identity you built to survive. And now the self is calling. It's not asking you to abandon the world. It's asking you to return to it, fully alive. Not as a persona, but as a whole, complex, creative, real human being. The instinct when life feels unreal is to fix something on the surface. Change jobs, move cities, break up, make a plan, get busy. But if your unreality is rooted in disconnection from the self, external shifts won't solve it. They'll just give you something new to perform. Jung would say, before you change your life, feel your life. Stop, sit in the quiet, listen. What is your body saying that your mind won't let you hear? What part of you has been denied so long it doesn't even bother speaking anymore? This isn't about productivity, it's about presence. Because when you stop editing your experience, you start experiencing it. And only then does reality begin to reform around you. Carl Jung called the path back to reality individuation. It's not self-improvement. It's not becoming better. It's becoming whole. Individuation is the lifelong process of integrating all parts of yourself, persona and shadow, conscious and unconscious, light and dark, fear and desire, wound and wisdom, not to transcend them, but to unify them. The more you bring the unconscious into consciousness, the more you remember who you are beneath the performance. Jung wrote, The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You can't become that if you're still living for image. You have to descend, to let the hidden speak, to let the wild return, to make peace with contradiction. Because wholeness isn't clean, but it is real. You don't need a retreat. You don't need a massive life change. To begin remembering what's real, you need ritual. Small, intentional moments that root you in your inner life. Here are some Jung-inspired practices that help reconnect you to self. 1. Active imagination. Let your mind wander into image, fantasy, dialogue. Ask your emotions to speak. Let them answer in dream logic. 2. Symbolic expression. Write, paint, move. Don't create to impress, create to access. The unconscious speaks through symbol, not sentence. Give it a voice. 3. Dream work. Write your dreams. Study the symbols. What do they say that your waking self won't? 4. Shadow dialogue. Pick a trait you judge or fear in yourself. Now speak to it. What is it protecting? What does it want? These may feel strange at first, but what's strange is often what's real. Let your practices bring you back into contact with the part of you that doesn't perform. One of the biggest fears when stepping out of the persona is this: do I have to show the world everything? The answer is no. Jung never asked for exposure. He asked for integration. This work is personal, not performative. You don't have to post your transformation. You don't have to explain your silence. You don't have to share your grief, or your awakening, or your rage. You just have to own it, feel it, know it's real for you, and live from that place, whether or not the world claps. Because authenticity isn't about volume, it's about alignment. So what changes when you finally return to your center? Everything and nothing. You still have a job, you still pay bills, you still navigate relationships, expectations, uncertainty, but the axis of your life shifts. Instead of reacting from habit, you respond from knowing. Instead of living from anxiety, you act from essence. You move slower. You speak more truth. You stop chasing what doesn't resonate. The people in your life may not understand it, but you will. And that's the beginning of reality reforming around you. Not as a concept, as a felt experience. You've spent years hiding, not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way, you were told the truth of you was too much, too wild, too sensitive, too dark, too deep, too intuitive, too angry, too joyful, too honest. And so you adjusted, you dimmed, you narrowed, you became acceptable. And now, life doesn't feel real, because you've been living it as someone else. But the moment you stop hiding, even from yourself, is the moment life begins to feel like yours again. It won't always be easy, but it will be real. And that's everything. It's easy to think that if you just keep going, keep performing, keep adapting, keep surviving, eventually it'll all click into place. But the longer you live inauthentically, the heavier the cost becomes. It's subtle at first. You start skipping things you once loved. You tune out during conversations. You struggle to remember what joy feels like. You get good at pretending to be fine. But beneath the surface, a different story unfolds. You begin to feel like a ghost in your own life, like you're watching someone else play the part you're supposed to live. This is not just emotional fatigue. It's a psychological fracture. And left unchecked, it turns into neurosis. Carl Jung observed that most of his patients weren't suffering from mental illness in the traditional sense. They were suffering from a loss of meaning. They weren't crazy. They were disconnected from their inner lives, from ritual, from soul, from purpose. Jung called this condition modern neurosis. a state of spiritual and symbolic starvation caused by over-identification with the ego and persona. In his words, "The majority of my patients consisted not of believers, but of those who had lost their faith. Not just religious faith, but trust in the realness of life itself. This kind of neurosis isn't loud. It doesn't always scream or collapse. It drips, slowly, quietly, steadily. It erodes your energy. It shrinks your vision. It numbs your emotions. And eventually, you stop expecting life to feel real at all." So how do you know if you're living in this space? It looks like this: feeling like you're performing in every social interaction, feeling unseen, even when surrounded by people, struggling to feel present in your own body, constant low-level apathy or anxiety, feeling detached from your past self and unclear about your future, regularly asking yourself, "What's the point?" These aren't random mood swings. They're soul signals. They're the psyche's way of alerting you. You've gone too far from your center, and the longer you delay the return, the harder the symptoms press. Because your self doesn't want you to suffer. It wants you to wake up. It's ironic. The more successfully you adapt to an inauthentic life, the harder it becomes to recognize that anything's wrong. You've built a system that functions. You get paid. You check boxes. You smile on command. But function is not the same as fulfillment. You can be a master of adaptation and still feel hollow inside. In fact, some of the most lost people Jung encountered were the most accomplished. Because their identity had become so tied to performance, they no longer knew how to live without it. This is the ultimate danger of persona dependence. You begin to fear your own depth. And when you fear your own depth, you stop evolving. You become a beautiful statue, impressive, admired, and completely frozen. Some people think returning to yourself means rejecting everything, quitting your job, ending all your relationships, moving into the woods, starting over from zero. But individuation isn't destruction. It's integration. You don't have to burn down your life. You just have to stop living only from the part that's afraid. You don't have to destroy your persona. You just have to recognize that it's a tool, not your identity. You outgrow the mask when you start letting truth lead, when you stop answering from habit, when you stop performing your emotions, when you stop shrinking to avoid discomfort. This is the real revolution, becoming yourself in public and no longer apologizing for it. Let this sink in. You were never meant to feel this numb. You were never meant to survive your life. You were meant to live it, fully, messily, honestly, soulfully. The emptiness you feel is not a flaw. It's not a weakness. It's not a failure. It is a natural response to an unnatural way of living. And you are allowed to choose again. You are allowed to pause, to recalibrate, to turn inward, to ask questions, to listen, and most of all, to remember, you are still in there. The self never left. It's just been waiting for you to return. Let's be clear. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not too far gone. You are simply living at a distance from your essence. A distance created by fear, expectation, conditioning, performance. And every time you've said, "I'm fine. It's not that bad. This is just how life is," you've been trying to adapt to a reality that doesn't reflect your truth. But here's the thing. You don't need to find a new you. You need to uncover the one who's always been there. Beneath the persona, beneath the shoulds, beneath the emotional armor and social polish and spiritual striving, the real you isn't missing. The real you is waiting. The most important choice you'll ever make is not what to do with your life, but how honestly you're willing to live it. Do you want to feel safe, or do you want to feel real? Do you want to be accepted, or do you want to be whole? This isn't a single moment of bravery. It's a daily practice. Choosing presence over performance, choosing stillness over noise, choosing depth over image, choosing yourself even when it's messy. You don't have to scream your truth. You just have to stop hiding from it. You're not imagining it. The world really is changing. Faster, louder, shallower. And in that chaos, the people who feel the most lost are often the ones most ready to awaken. Jung understood this. He believed that crisis is initiation, that inner fragmentation is not failure, but the beginning of return. And if life feels unreal to you right now, you are not failing to adapt. You are being asked to go deeper, to reconnect, to feel again, to remember. Here's the truth. The real self doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for approval. It doesn't chase relevance. It doesn't care what anyone thinks. The real self whispers in your discomfort, in your longing, in your hunger for something more. And once you begin to live from that place, you no longer need to prove your value. You simply are, rooted, present, real. The world might not understand, but you will finally feel at home in your own life. If Carl Jung could sit across from you today, quiet room, no cameras, no judgment, he wouldn't give you advice. He'd ask questions. He'd guide you toward what you already know. And in the stillness between those questions, you might begin to remember that the world's opinion is not more valuable than your soul. That meaning isn't found. It's created from within. That your numbness isn't a problem to fix, but a message to interpret. That there is no map, but there is a direction, and that direction points inward, always inward. So now I ask you, what part of yourself are you ready to stop performing? What truth have you been afraid to speak, even silently? What would it feel like to wake up tomorrow and decide to live from alignment instead of approval? This isn't a demand, it's a door. And if you're ready, step through. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more people who have the courage to stop pretending and start participating in reality as it truly is. Raw, beautiful, unpredictable, and alive. That is what you were made for. If this message resonated, if a part of you stirred that's been silent for too long, leave a comment. What's one thing you're ready to reclaim? What's one thing that no longer feels real to you, and why? And if you're walking this path, the path of awakening, remembering, and living from your truth, subscribe. We are not here to survive life. We're here to become real in it. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.